I learned to hear danger in a laugh. Dylan's laugh. Sharp, bright, empty. It sounded like good news to everyone else. To me, it was a siren. Years later, that same laugh would burn down my marriage. But first, it stole my childhood. We grew up in a modest house in Colorado. Split level, brown carpet, thin walls. Mom, Linda, treated Dylan like he was made of glass and sunlight. Warm meals on demand. Laundry folded like museum exhibits. If he lost a sock, the house went on lockdown. If I lost anything, Mom said I was careless and should be more like my brother. I stayed quiet. I always did. I was the kid with the scuffed library card and taped-up glasses. I kept my head down, lived in notebooks, learned early to be small. Dylan did not do small. He did entrances. He did noise. He rifled my sketchbook and paraded my drawings around like a talent show he hosted. He asked if I sketched because no one would ever want to look at me. It was a joke, he said. I wrote that down, another data point. Breakfast became a minefield. One morning, my spoon hit the bowl and I heard a hard tink. Plastic beads, the kind used for crafts, hid under the cornflakes. Dylan waited for the crunch. I didn't give it to him. I sifted the milk with the spoon, fished out a blue bead, and held it up like evidence. He grinned. Mom called it boys being boys and reminded me to rinse my dishes. I learned to test the cereal first. The hot sauce trick came after. He stirred it into my ketchup until it looked harmless. First bite, my lips burned. Dylan leaned against the counter and asked if I liked the new brand. Mom told me to drink milk and stop overreacting. I drank water from the tap, counted to 10, and decided I would never eat if I didn't control the variables. That's how I started cooking for myself at 12. Quiet, precise, enough salt to taste, and never more than I intended. At school, he kept the show going. The hallways carried sound like a drum. A shove here, a laugh there. He didn't throw the first push, not usually. He didn't have to. He warmed the crowd. A nickname, a smirk, a story about me sleeping with a nightlight. He would drift away while other kids finished the job. My books hit the floor. My glasses slid. I memorized where the lockers jutted out so I could pivot before impact. Data helps. It doesn't hug you back, but it helps. I tried telling Mom. I tried telling her about the beads, the hot sauce, the hallway games. She brushed my hair from my forehead and said, "Relax, he adores you. This is how brothers are. Maybe I should spend more time with him. Maybe I should try sports." Dad was quiet in those years. Busy, tired, not seeing the small cuts because they didn't bleed on the carpet. I didn't blame him for missing the pattern. Patterns look like noise until you stack the days together. One afternoon in the kitchen, Dylan grabbed my glasses and pretended to bend them. He didn't pretend well. The hinge groaned. I froze because sudden moves make bullies happy. He laughed, the siren kind, and asked if I would cry. I told him no. I would simply remember. He paused, gave me back the frames, and walked out whistling. That night, I tightened the screws with a pocket knife and wrote. He backs off when I don't give him the scene. Would you call that normal roughhousing, or something else? The worst line he crossed didn't leave a mark. It was a sentence. He threw it during a bad week when the jokes got mean and my sleep got thin. He leaned close and said the world would be better if I disappeared. He said it lightly, like a weather report. I heard it heavy. I didn't tell anyone. I just went quieter, sat in the shower stool until the water ran cold, and promised myself I'd outlast the noise. Sometimes survival doesn't look brave. It looks like counting breaths to 60 and doing it again. Teachers noticed my grades, not the bruises you can't photograph. I kept straight A's because numbers made sense even when people did not. Dylan kept fans because charisma is louder than truth. Mom kept peace by redefining harm as humor. I kept a list. It wasn't revenge. It was inventory. The house learned my routines. I got up early to eat before Dylan. I left school late to avoid his car. I stopped bringing sketchbooks home. Control, then control some more. If you can't win a game, change the rules. If you can't change the rules, change yourself, quietly, piece by piece. I didn't know it then, but a fuse was already burning under our roof. A single spark would light it. I could almost hear it in the quiet between his jokes. The day he brought a lighter into the kitchen, the data set changed. The flame was small, almost playful, and much too close to my hair. The kitchen hummed with the fridge motor. The window cracked for January air. I smelled butane first, then singed split ends. Dylan giggled like we were testing science. I knocked his wrist away and saw the lighter arc toward the sink. My scalp tingled. The laugh kept going. What do you do when home is where the fire starts? Mom rushed in. Instinct said excuse, and she obeyed it. Boys. Roughhousing. He didn't mean it. I stared at the blackened hair on my shoulder and said nothing. Dylan shrugged, pocketed the lighter, and wandered out like a magician between tricks. It would have ended there, another notch in the inventory, if Dad hadn't stepped into the doorway and finally looked. Robert doesn't raise his voice. He measures it. He took in the hair, the lighter, the way my hands shook only after danger passed. He turned to Dylan and asked a simple question. Do you understand how quickly hair burns? Dylan cracked a joke. Dad didn't laugh. The kitchen cooled by 10 degrees. That night, he knocked on my door like a guest in his own house. We sat on the edge of the bed, twin shadows on the carpet. He said he had waited for Dylan to grow out of it. He said waiting was a mistake. He asked me to walk him through the pattern, so I did. Beads and cereal, hot sauce and condiments, the hallways at school, the lighter. I didn't beg for rescue. I just showed him the data. The next morning, he wore his suit and his insurance face. He met the principal at 8 a.m., listed dates and names, and made eye contact long enough for policies to remember their purpose. He didn't threaten. He described liability. He said harassment has a cost when you can prove a pattern. Adults heard dollar signs. Suddenly, my locker became visible. After school, he drove me to a jiu-jitsu gym tucked behind a tire shop. The place smelled like bleach and rubber. Blue mats. No mirrors. A bell that didn't ring. The coach greeted us with cauliflower ears and kind eyes. Dad explained I needed a place to learn boundaries. The coach nodded like he taught that more than arm bars. He did. The first class rearranged my brain. You don't fight in jiu-jitsu. You solve. You breathe, frame, create angles, and remove slack from problems until they stop writhing. I learned that panic lives in the chest, and breath evicts it. I learned leverage doesn't care who started it. I learned taps mean we keep each other safe while we get stronger. Control, not spectacle. My kind of language. At home, Dylan kept his distance, maybe bored, maybe warned by Dad's new gravity. Mom said she didn't like the idea of me choking people. I told her it was the opposite. I was learning not to. She said I was being dramatic. I drilled hip escapes on my bedroom carpet until the fibers pressed a map into my elbows. Weeks became muscle memory. I managed homework on the bus and rolls on the mat. The coach taught us to keep our hands quiet and our frames loud. When a heavier kid crushed my ribs, he whispered, "Make space where there is none." I did. Air returned like a gift. I smiled. He didn't. Confidence doesn't arrive like a parade. It leaks in, a drop at a time. I stopped flinching at laughs. I looked people in the eyes 2 beats longer. I held the door for myself. At school, the principal's warning memo made its rounds, and the crowd cooled. You can feel when a target moves out of season. Dad kept showing up, late dinners on the way home from work, quiet questions about class, careful praise for effort, not rank. He didn't ask me to forgive Dylan. He asked me to stay available to the future. That felt fair. I didn't need a brother. I needed a witness. Then something shifted. Dylan started complaining about money. Date nights, gas, clothes to impress people who already adored him. I kept a jar in my closet for a laptop fund, counted bills by tens like a private ceremony. Control is sacred when chaos lives next door. The night before it happened, I slept well for once. No bad dreams, no phantom alarms. The house was quiet, and quiet felt like progress. Morning would break that illusion cleanly. He didn't light a fire this time. He took one. When I caught him at the door with my bike and his backpack bulging, a new instinct answered first. Not anger, clarity. The frame I had been building finally held. I told him to put the cash back. He smirked and called me Dad Snitch. My fist moved like a decision already made. Balance is funny. It tips fast after years of almost. The punch landed, the world narrowed, and the inventory got its first red line. Return to sender. But that's another chapter. Tell me, have you ever felt your life hinge on a single, simple motion? I caught him at the door. My bike between us. His backpack swollen with my cash. He grinned. Borrowed it. Big date. I saw the jar's imprint in the fabric. Weeks of bus rides and side jobs. Put it back, I said. He called me Dad Snitch, waited for a scene. I gave him a decision. A clean, straight punch. Knuckles. Cheekbone. Silence. He staggered, shocked that gravity applies to golden children. I reached into his pocket and took the wad. No speech. Just counting. 10s, 20s, The missing fives. He cried, loud and messy, and yelled for Mom. Data point. Power cries when it loses the microphone. Mom rushed in and picked her side. She saw tears, not theft. My fist, not the jar. Marcus, you hit your brother? I held up the bills. He stole them. She whispered, borrowed like a soft pillow you can't breathe through. Dad came home to a courtroom in the kitchen. He listened, then asked one question. Did you take money that wasn't yours? Dylan tried angles, ran out, mumbled yes. Then you're lucky he stopped at a punch, Dad said. To me, next time call. We both knew a line had moved. Dylan adapted. No shoves, just mutters out of reach. School air cooled. The principal's memo had teeth. On the mats, Coach said, you set a boundary. Keep it. Mom pushed. Be the bigger brother, meaning be smaller. I let it pass like weather. Dad started showing up. Errands, sandwiches in a quiet car. No big apologies. Just presents. I stretched past the house. Applications, scholarships, yellow highlights. The acceptance letter landed. Full ride, out of state. I breathed. Dad hugged relief. Dylan sneered that college was for people without friends. I smiled. He didn't. I packed like a surgeon. Labeled bins. On the laptop box, one sticky note. Return to sender. Would you have swung, or watched your savings walk out the door? After the punch, the house quieted. Pressure, not peace. Dylan stopped shoving and started sniping. Linda ran messages. Give him grace, meaning give him ground. I asked for one real talk. She refused to be in the middle. So I outgrew the room. Grades, applications, maths. Control as a daily ritual. Dad noticed. Errands, sandwiches, presents instead of speeches. The letter came. Full ride, out of state. He called it a celebration. I called it oxygen. Dylan muttered. College is for people without friends. I smiled. He didn't. I packed like a surgeon. Bins, labels, no wasted motion. On the laptop box, do not return. Silence became another kind of control. Campus reset everything. Library glow, cafeteria hum, no weaponized laughter. Numbers made sense. People started to. At a mixer under string lights, Jenna asked if the seat was free. Her smile didn't want a performance, just a person. Shared church childhoods. Shared plan. Strong, simple, faithful. Coffee became study nights, then hikes, then winter walks where breath kept time. I called home less. Distance helped. Dad sounded lighter. Dylan stayed a rumor. I thought I'd outrun the noise. I hadn't. The fuse waited for vows, baby names, the word father. When it lit, everything I believed would be tested. Tell me, have you ever mistaken distance for safety? Senior year, Jenna missed a period. Conservative families. Quick wedding, small church, promises said softly. I pictured a simple, faithful life. Work, dinners, bedtime stories. I held that picture hard. Leo arrived, and I learned fatherhood by doing. Bottles at 2 a.m., laundry at 6. I liked the rhythm. I liked who I was with him. I didn't need fireworks. I needed peace. Then the first crack. A married coworker. It was a mistake, she said, shaking, swearing it was over. I left for a week, walked the city, counted my breaths. Came back because Leo needed a home, not a ping-pong table for adults who couldn't decide. We tried again. Date nights, counseling books, passwords shared. Trust didn't return. It limped. I told myself scars hold things together. It sounded noble. It wasn't true. Months later, a second cut. An old boyfriend during a hometown visit. Short, stupid, meaningless. I slept on the couch and stared at the ceiling fan. I could file for divorce or choose the child who called me daddy without thinking. I chose Leo. Would you have stayed after the second betrayal? We reset, again. Budget spreadsheets, backyard weekends, slow routines. I built a fence around the day and guarded it. People called it forgiveness. I called it tree-off. You stop the bleeding first. You argue philosophy after. Time helped on the surface. The house got quieter. We planned for school supplies, not lawyers. I started believing we'd turned a corner. I wanted that belief to be enough. It wasn't. The third truth didn't knock. It sat me down. 3 months ago, Jenna finally told me why I could never sleep. 3 months ago, Jenna set 2 mugs down and didn't touch hers. Her hands shook in small, efficient tremors, the kind you can miss if you want to. I didn't. I waited. The room hummed like a fridge that never turns off. I've been seeing someone, she said. Air thinned. For a long time. I asked for the name once. She gave it. Dylan. Silence can feel like altitude. Your brain looks for a chair. I asked for the timeline, not the drama. She went back to college. Thanksgiving at my parents', movie nights, Dylan needing to talk after a breakup. Flirting when I left the room. One afternoon turned into sex. She cut the visit short. Weeks later, a missed period. She didn't know whose it was. She stayed with me because I was stable, safe. Then hotels. Over time. Years, not months. Small lies aging into architecture. Sound changed. I could hear the clock living in the hallway. I remembered Leo's first laugh, the way his eyes crinkled. I also remembered the thought I'd buried. Do they look like mine? I had deleted that file a dozen times. It restored itself anyway. I didn't shout. Shouting is imprecise. How long? How often? Protection? Last time. She answered with small numbers and long pauses. I wrote the pattern in my head, neat columns, clean sums that made me sick. What hurts more, losing a marriage or losing your name as a father? I went to the closet and took a duffel. Socks, charger, toothbrush. Jenna begged for the old cycle. Tears, promises, reset. I told her cycles are for machines. People choose. I booked a budget hotel near the highway, paid cash, parked under a light. On the bed, I made a list. Lawyer, test, disclosures. Data over hope. Evidence over memory. I added one more line. Tell my parents everything. Leo's door was closed when I left. I didn't touch the handle. If I stayed, I'd comfort him. If I comforted him, I'd hesitate. Hesitation is how patterns survive. Morning would be for calls and labs. Evening would be for whatever the truth demanded. Would you still ask for answers if the price was your entire story? I packed in straight lines, socks, shirts, charger, while Jenna cried for a cycle we'd already buried. If you love me, fight for us. I did, I said. For years. I left the ring on the dresser like evidence and checked into a cheap hotel. Morning, I drove to my parents. Coffee on the table, silence on the air. I gave them the pattern without adjectives. Dates. Hotels. The possibility Leo wasn't mine. Dad went still. Mom shook her head. Dylan would never. Denial is fast. Evidence is faster. Let's remove doubt, I said, and put my phone on speaker. Dylan answered with a smirk in his voice. I told him Jenna had confessed. Asked if he'd deny it to our parents' faces. He started with charm. Slid to insults about Jenna. Bragged about attention he never stole. I was invited. Then he paused. He heard himself. So did we. Dad leaned forward. So you slept with your brother's wife. Silence. Dylan exhaled, thin and angry. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. Precision beats volume. Mom whispered no, again and again, like the word could reverse time. Dad didn't comfort the room. He held the line. He asked Dylan when it started. College. Thanksgiving. The day I ran an errand and Trust took a walk. He asked how long. Off and on. Dylan said, small now, finally literal. I kept my voice level. There will be a test. There will be a divorce. He snorted, tried to call me dramatic, a robot, a victim. I ended the call. The kitchen stayed very quiet. Dad's hands were steady. He said consequences would be clear and immediate. Mom reached for me, apology breaking through loyalty. She said she never saw it. I believed her and didn't. Both can be true. I booked the lab that afternoon. Lawyer the next. List, steps, proof. Move like a metronome when your heart wants to sprint. Ever put a speakerphone between you and the past? That night, the three of us ate in near silence. We weren't a family. We were a crime scene. Tomorrow would decide what survived. Dad picked up the phone before I could. He didn't raise his voice, he narrowed it. He told Dylan he'd crossed a line that doesn't move back. He listed the consequences like items on a form. No more rent, no tuition, no emergency transfers, no credit cards with his name. The education trust, revoked. Effective today. Dylan tried the old charm. It slid off. When Dad hung up, the house felt colder, but finally honest. Mom reached for the softer story. He's still your brother. I said yes, and this is still what he did. She cried, apologized to me, then called it a terrible mistake. Dad didn't engage the label. He booked 2 appointments, one for a family attorney, one for a divorce lawyer he trusted. He asked if I wanted him in both rooms. I said yes. Precision needs witnesses. The lawyer met us in a quiet office that smelled like coffee and old paper. I gave a timeline without adjectives. He skimmed, nodded once, and laid out a path. File on fault grounds, protect my assets, request temporary orders, get a paternity test immediately. Alimony? I asked. Her documented infidelity cuts that down to dust, he said. No victory tone, just a clean reading of the field. We served papers the next morning. Jenna shook when she signed. She asked for one more chance. I told her we'd had a dozen. She said Leo needed stability. I said Leo needed truth. The words didn't move the air. Some rooms refused to breathe. The lab was fluorescent and efficient. Forms, cotton swabs, chain of custody stickers that felt heavier than they looked. I watched the tech seal my sample, then Leo's. He hugged my leg out of habit. Instinct said pick him up. Strategy said don't. I bent down, brushed his shoulder, and told him we were doing a quick science thing. He laughed, small and bright, the sound that used to fix my day. I stood up because my knees were giving out. Waiting turns adults into children. I stared at my phone, counted hydrants on my walks, lifted weights until my joints complained. Work helped. Numbers still behave when people don't. Every night, I returned to the same blank wall where his drawings used to be. I'd taken them down because looking hurt more than missing them. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Thin, official, final. Dad stood across from me. Mom sat at the end of the table, hand over her mouth. I slit the top with a butter knife because living rooms don't stock scalpels. The letter spoke in decimals. It didn't stutter. The probability of me being the father was essentially zero. The probability for Dylan was, for legal purposes, absolute. Mom made a sound I'd never heard from her, a soft collapse. Dad put a hand on my shoulder and didn't remove it. I breathed like I was learning it again. Data has no bedside manner. It only cuts. I called my lawyer. He said this clarified obligations. He also said to slow down before making promises about visitation or amicable anything. You can love the child and still choose a boundary that protects your life, he said. The sentence felt like a bridge I didn't want but needed. That night, I stared at Leo's toothbrush in the cup. Blue, tiny, brave. My brain ran both movies. The one where I stay in his life and see Jenna every week, and the one where I step back and let the people who made this mess raise him. Both hurt. Only one gave me a chance to heal. I chose the second. No speeches, no vows, just a decision I could keep at 2 a.m. I wrote Leo a letter I won't give him unless he asks someday. I told him I loved being his every day. I told him any good in him that came from me wasn't DNA. It was time, stories, pancakes on Sundays, and the way we checked the weather together like it mattered. I sealed the letter and put it in a box with his drawings and my spare house key. Then I gave the key back to myself. Jenna's attorney tried to push for temporary support, called it fairness given the child's needs. My lawyer slid the test across the table. The conversation adjusted. On property, we were clean. We'd kept separate accounts, separate purchases. There was nothing for her to take except time, and I was done giving that away without consent. Mom asked if there was a way to do both, to protect myself but still be dad. I said the word out loud, slowly, dad, and felt what it had turned into. A bruise. A trigger. A word that would tie my life to the person who detonated it. Not now, I told her. Maybe not ever. She cried again. I let her. Not my job to make this easier to watch. Dad handled the hard calls. He personally told grandparents and aunts. He didn't gossip. He reported. Adults like to pretend neutrality is kindness. He chose clarity instead. The family split along values, not blood. It was cleaner than I expected and uglier than I wanted. Dylan tried to reach me 3 times. First with jokes, then rage, then pity. I didn't answer. He left one message about being men and moving on. It sounded like a door he wanted me to hold open while he walked through. I deleted it. Men can move on without witnesses. The divorce hearing was quick. The judge reviewed the record, fault grounds, affairs, the test. She called the situation unfortunate. I called it finished. Papers stamped, rings boxed. Walking out felt like stepping from a pressure chamber. You don't notice the weight until your lungs expand. I went back to the apartment and cooked something simple. Eggs, toast, black coffee. I ate standing up, the way I did in college when time was tight and hope was cheap. The silence didn't accuse me. It invited me. I sat on the couch and let the clock tick without asking for permission. What hurts more, losing the woman you loved or losing the name you wore for a child? I still don't know. I only know which loss I can recover from. Before bed, Dad called. He said he was proud of how I carried myself. Then he said he had one more appointment, his estate planner, tomorrow morning. His voice was steady, almost too steady. He said it was time to align his will with his values. I didn't argue. I just listened to the quiet after. It sounded like a door closing and another one unlocking. I turned off the light and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere on the other side of town, Dylan was doing math for the first time in his life. He wouldn't like the answer. The next day would make it official. The apartment smelled like new paint and black coffee. Quiet wasn't empty. It was oxygen. I bought 2 plates, 1 pan, a plan I'd probably forget to water, and a bed that didn't share history with anyone. I hung nothing on the walls. Space helps you breathe when your head wants to replay. Mornings found a rhythm. Gym, shower, eggs, spreadsheet, repeat. I walked to work and counted the crosswalk beeps like a metronome. No custody schedules. No, we need to talk. No toothbrushes that weren't mine. I handled my life the way I handled data. Clean inputs, audit the flow, confirm the output. A month in, Dad called. His voice had that careful steadiness he uses for bad claims and big decisions. I saw the estate planner, he said. I made changes. I didn't ask for numbers. He gave them anyway. Assets, insurance, a total just under 1.7. To me. To the son who showed up and didn't stab the family table. Dylan would get $1. Not a metaphor. A ledger entry. He added a clause about the house. Mom could live there for the rest of her life, though the title would pass to me immediately. A life estate without drama. He waited for me to react. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. This wasn't about money. It was alignment. Values in ink. We met the next night at his kitchen table. He slid copies across the wood and pointed to signatures. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger wastes fuel. He was exact. Blood's not a coupon, he said. Mom poured tea in silence. Her eyes were red. She asked if there was room to reconsider later. Dad didn't answer. He stared at the steam and let the question evaporate. I walked home under a sky that felt too big for my small apartment. I didn't feel rich. I felt unburdened. Like someone had closed a file that never should have been opened. I slept without dreaming for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't blocked yet. Dylan. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Noise in the background, tools, an air compressor, a radio stuck between stations. He breathed like someone who needed an audience. I heard about the will, he said, trying for casual and landing on shaky. You know Dad. He'll calm down. He always does. I let silence sit. He filled it. They always do. I dropped out, he added, like a footnote that weighed a ton. Engineering wasn't my thing. I'm at a shop now. Part-time. Jenna's on me about support, and, it's a lot, man. There it was, names thrown like life preservers. College. Work. Jenna. Child support. Not a confession. A case. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to negotiate. I need you to talk to them, he said. Get Dad to rethink. Tell him I'm. He paused, searching for the word. Trying. I pictured him in a stained hoodie, thumb rubbing a grease line into the phone, still convinced gravity could be charmed. My voice stayed level. You want me to ask for your allowance back? It's not an allowance, he snapped, then softened. Look, I messed up. But you know how Jenna is. You know she. I cut that off. Don't throw her at me like a shield. Calm beats volume. You both built this. Silence. Then a sigh that tried to sound wounded and only managed winded. You're not Dad, Marcus. You don't have to be cold. The word landed with no heat. Cold is just control after a fire. What do you want exactly? I asked. Script it. He wasn't ready for plain language. He fumbled, then found the request. Talk to him. Give me a meeting. Make it fixable. Fixable. As if the only broken thing was the money. As if you can unfry an egg by writing a check. My jaw unclenched on purpose. Do you think this happened to you? I asked. Or because of you? He laughed, short, defensive. Spare me the TED Talk. I let him have the line. Okay, I said. Then hear this instead. Choices compound. So do consequences. He went quiet long enough for the compressor on his end to turn off. I could hear tires squeal outside the bay. Somewhere, a wrench clanged. I'm still your brother, he said, small now. Titles are easy. Behavior is expensive. That was true before my wedding day, I said. You retired it. I was hurting, he tried. You always had. Enough, I said. Not loud. Final. The words sat between us like a closed door only I could lock. He shifted tactics, rolled out pity like a fresh carpet. Jenna's drowning me with support. I can't keep up. Leo needs. Leo needs a father who doesn't outsource his life, I said. The sentence surprised even me with its weight. Be that. Or don't. But stop asking me to be it for you. He sniffed, and for a second I thought he might cry. Then the old edge returned. You think this makes you better? No, I said. It makes me done. I didn't hang up. I let the words settle. He reached for one more angle. If I had known about the will, I never. He stopped. Too honest by accident. I felt something dark and amused flicker through me. Cold humor burns cleaner than rage. Who told you? I asked. He hesitated. Doesn't matter. It did actually. Not for the money, for the pattern. But that reveal could wait. I pictured Mom's red eyes and her quiet plea for reconsideration. Later, I'd learn how the news traveled. Patterns always show their routes if you stay patient. I'll think, I said finally. Not a promise. A delay. I'll call you tomorrow. He exhaled like he'd won a round. Thanks, man. I knew you. I ended the call before he could finish the sentence. He'd think hope meant yes. I needed the night to make sure it meant no for the right reasons. I stood at the window and watched headlights stitch the street together. Would you pull your arsonist from the fire he lit? Or let him learn heat the way you learned silence? I brewed coffee I didn't need and let it go cold. The question wasn't about him. It was about me. The next morning, Dad texted, "Don't let guilt bargain with your memory." I stared at the words until they read like a prayer. Then I dressed for work, ironed the shirt I almost never iron, and wrote a single sentence on a sticky note above my desk. Boundaries are daily, not ceremonial. By lunch, I knew what I'd say. By dinner, I knew how I'd say it. Calm. Precise. No speeches. No savior role. I set my phone on the table and waited for the hour to turn. Tomorrow would be the last time I used his number. I called it the exact minute I said I would. Boundaries are daily, not ceremonial. I put the phone on the table, set my shoulders, and watched the second hand step over the line I'd drawn. Dylan answered with a smile inside his voice. He started soft, knew you'd come through, then swerved into pressure, the kind that used to work on me. Jenna, the baby, bills, the will. He stacked words like sandbags and waited for me to hold the flood. I'm not fixing this, I said. Calm, precise, full stop. He laughed, the old kind, the siren that used to own my nervous system. You're really going to let Dad cut me off? I didn't swing the blade, I said. You did. Repeatedly. He tried route 2, pity. Everyone's turned on me. Grandma, the cousins, even Tyler. They won't take my calls. You going to be like them? I'm going to be like me, I said. I'm done. Silence. I let it breathe. On his end, a compressor cycled, a wrench clanged. You can hear small lives working hard when big lives collapse. You're not a saint for this, he said, voice narrowing. Saints forgive, I said. I'm not in the clergy. He inhaled through his nose, a little snort of anger, then reached for the rope he always used last. I'm still your brother. Not since my wedding day, I said. You retired that title. He cried then, quiet, embarrassed, real. For a second, I felt the old instinct, move toward the sound. Instead, I did nothing. A new muscle. Learn from this, I said. Or don't. But stop asking me to live your consequences. I ended the call. No slam. Just a clean click. The room stayed the same, and so did I. That used to feel impossible. The family fallout arrived quickly, then slowly. Grandparents called my father in a chorus of disbelief that ended in agreement. If we excuse this, Grandpa said, what don't we excuse? The cousins split into texts. Some said, we love you, we're here. One or two floated the word forgiveness like a helium balloon and watched it drift out of reach. Tyler sent a screenshot of Dylan asking for a place to crash. Tyler replied with 3 words, not this time. Even a wide net stops pretending to be a hammock when the boat starts taking on water. A week later, I sat across from Mom at her kitchen table while the dishwasher hummed like a white flag. She looked tired in a way mascara can't fix. She pushed a mug toward me, then pushed the real thing she'd been holding. I told Dylan, she said, about the will. I thought if he knew how serious your father was, maybe he'd change. Change arrives before warnings, not because of them. I didn't say that. I asked a smaller question that held the bigger one. Why go behind Dad's back? She pressed her palm to her eyes. I keep thinking if I choose him hard enough, he'll become the person I chose. I let the sentence sit. It explained the kitchen years better than anything had. Dad stood in the doorway, quiet, hands in his pockets the way he does when he's about to file a difficult claim. He didn't raise his voice. He named reality. Linda, if you keep contacting him about money or the will, I'll move out. I won't live inside a broken boundary. Her head rose. The words landed not as a threat, but as architecture. For once, we all looked at the same floor plan. She nodded without a fight. It hurt to watch. It also felt like oxygen. Time recalculated. Months, not days, taught me who I was without crisis. At work, I stopped hiding in reliable and started presenting. My numbers told a story. I told it out loud. A quarter later, my manager slid a new title and a salary band across a table. It wasn't dramatic. It was earned. The raise helped, but the dignity helped more. I ran at dawn because you can outrun noise if you start early. I lifted after work because heavy things teach you where to put your breath. Once a week, I sat in a quiet office with a therapist who didn't flinch at decimals or betrayal. She asked boring questions that opened locked doors. Where do you put anger? Who taught you to make yourself small? What happens in your body when laughter sounds like threat? I answered like a man filing his life. The order felt medicinal. I didn't date. Not because I was scared, although I was, but because emptiness isn't a vacancy, it's recovery. I cooked for one and didn't call it lonely. On Sundays, I brewed coffee, opened the window, and read something that had nothing to do with healing. A dumb detective novel can hold a life together while the big themes take the week off. Dad and I rebuilt the simple way. Tasks. We replaced a faucet. We changed the cabin filter in his car while he taught me the cheat for getting the glove box back on track without swearing. He didn't tell me he loved me. He installed a dimmer switch and handed me the plate when my hands were full. Men say brother with tools. Fathers say son with time. Mom moved carefully, like the house had new edges. She apologized again, differently. Less about me and more about the story she'd told herself. She asked if I thought she was a bad mother. I told her I thought she was a hopeful one who confused hope with help. She laughed through a tear and called that too clever. Maybe, but she got it. We planned small things. Sunday dinners where the table seats 3 and the extra chair just means space, not absence. News about Dylan arrived like weather reports. Short, factual, mostly gray. Tyler said he dropped out for good and clocked at an auto shop full-time. He and Jenna were together, on and off, then on, because bills are glue. The image that came to me was two people balancing on the same thin branch and insisting it's a bridge. I didn't rejoice. That kind of joy has a hangover. Sometimes, late, I open the box with Leo's drawings and the sealed letter I wrote him. I trace a crayon sun and feel my throat fold. The therapist named it cleanly, grief without funeral. I asked if choosing no contact made me cruel. She said a useful thing. There's a difference between being heartless and protecting your heart. I nodded and filed the sentence next to the lab result. Evidence, not permission. On a Tuesday that looked like any other, I ran into Jenna in the grocery store. The aisle with coffee filters and paper towel deals. She looked like a person living with the volume turned down. We didn't say our old names. She asked if I was okay. I said I was getting there. She asked if I hated her. I said I didn't have time to hate anyone. We stood too long in the way of carts and then stepped aside for people who still needed things. When I got home, I didn't shake. Progress hides in boring scenes. The last loose end tied itself. Mom stopped texting Dylan about money. Dad didn't move out. The house found level. Holidays felt strange and then simply smaller. We ate, told ordinary stories, and cleaned the kitchen without comparing scars. Not every family returns to previous settings. Some become new devices with fewer buttons. Easier to use. Less likely to explode. Do I ever wonder if I should have pulled Dylan from the fire he lit? Yes. Do I ever miss the kid I thought was my son? Every morning. Would I do anything differently, knowing what I know now? That's the wrong question. The right one is simpler. Who am I when no one else is steering? One evening, Dad and I sat on the back steps. Warm air and sprinkler hiss. The kind of quiet that used to scare me and now feels like proof. He said he was proud of the man I became. I said I was proud of the man he decided to be. We didn't clink glasses. We watched a porch light across the street turn on and stay on. That night, I slept a full 8 without waking to check a door I already locked. I dreamed about nothing, which is another word for peace. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.